To thank everybody here for joining us and learning about health. And 2 years ago, I definitely enjoyed having Dr. Franklin here. And
Thank you.
yeah, against all odds, we made it. And yeah,
Seems like it.
seems like it. And we'll have a quick prayer and then we'll get into it.
Okay.
Lord, Heavenly Father, we thank you for this time. And Lord, thank you that you're close enough, God, to worry about our health and want us to have knowledge about health. So, Lord, we just ask that you be with us today, and may our knowledge and wisdom grow exceedingly. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. On that note, please put your phones on silent.
I should too.
Thanks. And me too.
Okay, there we go. All right. There is much I could say, but I'm going to try to condense a lot of things into just one, I might say juiced. We're going to juice this down and give you just the best squeeze out of the material that I could cover and that we did cover in much greater detail 2 years ago, and that what we will do again in another health retreat in the future when the whole team can be involved, when we can do things for longer sessions instead of just one or two or three. As such, I'm intending to leave the last 10 or 15 minutes of the hour for you to ask questions. So I'll try not to leave too many questions in your mind as I present some things. But plan, if you have questions, hold those thoughts, and then when we get to the end, I'll open it up and you can have some time to ask something related to what I presented, or after those questions, you ask me anything you want, because I think this might be my one chance here with you at Newmarket-on-Fergus. So it is very good to be back. How many of you have been here before, or is this your first time visiting this location? Anybody first time? Anybody? Welcome. What's your name? Caroline. Oh, did you meet my friend Taffy? Is she the one who told you about it? Okay. How did you hear?
My friend Michal.
Michal. Okay. Oh, okay. Well, I'll meet him at court because I don't recognize his name. I thought maybe Taffy. What was mentioned was I do some lifestyle medicine in addition to anesthesiology. How many of you here are confident you know what lifestyle medicine is? Or have you heard of the American College of Lifestyle Medicine? Great, I took out that slide. I'm sorry. It's not. There is some overlap. There it is. Yeah, so functional medicine, mind-body medicine, occupational medicine, physical medicine, and alternative medicine. All are differ from each other. We have some overlap. Some people who are practitioners of those branches actually get certified in lifestyle medicine as well. At least in America, it is a specialty. And the community of faith here, you would think of lifestyle medicine more as 8 laws of health. In America, in the society, or the American College of Lifestyle Medicine, we reduce things down to what we refer to as the 6 pillars of lifestyle medicine. And I mentioned the whole food plant-based diet, which is a point of contention between our friends in Britain and actually almost the rest of the world. We'll stick with a nutritional program that is whole food plant-based, predominant, not exclusive, but predominantly with that approach. And these are just little symbols you might see if you were to go online and look at the American College or the Global Alliance of Lifestyle Medicine Practitioners, of which Ireland has a chapter, France does, Italy, Australia, all over the world. You'll see these symbols or emblems to remind patients what we're about. We talk about physical activity, avoiding harmful substances. That's what that orange little symbol there is. It has a cigarette and some alcohol bottle and heroin, I think, is on the side there too. we talk about, I will this evening, talk about social connections and the importance of sleep habits and stress management. We, as a specialty, prescribe, rather than medicines, we prescribe behavioral changes. Not that we can't or don't prescribe medicine, we do. Often people will come to us who are taking large amounts of prescription medications. But our goal is to reduce those, reduce the cost, reduce the side effects that people describe when they're, particularly as you start adding on medicine to medicine. We call that polypharmacy. I mean, some of my patients will come and they'll have literally a sheet of paper, 8.5 by 11 with names of medicine from top to bottom. And they're tired. And they're, so they have all these kind of different side effects. And so these are what we call the pillars, or the main strategies that we will deal with when we talk about lifestyle medicine. So we help people change the way they live their life, because if you change the way someone lives their life, you change who they are. And when who they are changes, the diseases tend to go away. And you no longer end up having to treat people for those illnesses that they came to visit you for. So what I'm going to do, I'll spend maybe 5 minutes or so on each pillar, throw out some things that aren't too technical. I might mention some names or studies that are what we would call seminal or really, really important. If you want to go, if you're that kind of person, you're kind of nerdy, or you want to check my facts, I want to make it so you can take pictures. You can have my slides. I don't care. I'm not protective. I'm an anesthesiologist. I'm not a very proud person. You can't be a proud physician in America and practice anesthesiology because no one considers you a physician. You're just somebody in the back of the room, helping them do greater, bigger, better things. So please whip out your cell phone, take pictures of stuff if that's what you want to do. Personally, I find that if I write things down, I remember things better. So I tend to encourage people to write notes. And this is just you don't have, this image is just to kind of represent a whole food, plant-based diet type of scenery that you might encounter if you sit down at a nice restaurant. I think I had a couple chances last year to see a couple in Dublin that had very nice plant-based menus when I was in Dublin. Or if you might visit some of the people who attend this church, you would probably find this type of food on their plate. Svetlana graciously gave me a plate of something similar to this after I got off the plane and came here. But let's run through these pillars one at a time. We'll talk with nutrition first. I think most of the people who practice lifestyle medicine would tell you that if you could change one thing about an individual's lifestyle, the food that they eat will make the biggest, most rapid and positive impact on their wellness if that's all they did. I graduated from medical school with the founding president of the American College of Lifestyle Medicine, and we've talked about this through the years. He would ask me, I would ask him, what do you think is most important? What do you start with? If someone's willing to make one change or one alteration in what they live, what would you tell them? Or how do you start? What is their benefit from doing so? And we're thinking it's probably a good 70% of the improvement we see in people within the 10-day to 1-year range, because we do see radical changes within 10 days. If you change the diet to a strict diet, changes in their lipid profiles, their inflammatory markers, their blood pressure, their insulin resistance, their weight loss in 10 days. If you got a year, it's about the same. But if you can just change the diet, this is kind of where the big guns are. Then I might add physical activity and sleep as the other ones, and then you add everything else to make a fuller, more full package. But if you're interested in what, doc, just tell me one thing I could do this week. So we're going to run through a couple of things that relate to diet. So what about the diet? Well, we emphasize vegetables, fruit, whole grains, legumes. It's the kind of technical term. Most of the rest of us call them beans, nuts or seeds. And then what you want to minimize, notice I'm not saying eliminate. If you want a therapeutic effect, you might want to eliminate some of these things. But you can still make a really positive impact if you minimize stuff like a lot of the highly processed foods that have added sweeteners or sugars, added, what would we say, ultra highly processed colorings, flavors that are said to be natural, but only contain like 5% natural flavors and the rest is all chemicalization. Especially processed meats have a lot of sodium and fat and other things that you probably want to stay away from. And if you just change the diet alone, like I mentioned, what I see happen when people come to me for a 10-day program, or I worked with John to do like 1-month programs, the type 2 diabetes tends to, almost said reverse, go into remission, I think is the technical term we're encouraged in America to use. I still use reversal. And I'll use reversal for one reason. When people don't need medication anymore and their blood sugars don't qualify for the diagnosis of diabetes anymore, I call that reversal. And so I see that happen. But generally, real quick, because I don't want to spend too much time on just diabetes alone, it needs to happen pretty close to the 10-year mark. Once you get diagnosed with prediabetes, if you can come to me within about 10 years, that's a huge window. If I can catch you by 10 years, we can reverse that. Once you go about 5 years into full diabetes with medication and starting insulin, that's usually because your pancreas has failed and you're not going to get enough function back to be able to come off medication. You've actually abused your body systems long enough, severely enough, that it's really difficult to reverse that. But if you haven't, the diet can generally reverse that. Coronary artery disease is the same, as is hypertension and obesity. I made a quick note. It was a study I just saw this week back at, I think it was Colorado University in Boulder. I was thinking about when I tell you about the artificial sweeteners, and there's a lot of things being added to try to create flavors that people like, but without the calories, right? Like Coke Zero, other things that they say is 0 calorie, but it still tastes like it's loaded with sugar. There's a particular sweetener called erythritol. You guys have that or use that, or has it been intelligently banned? You know, some of our EU friends have the sense to ban some of these things. In America, we have erythritol. The problem is it messes with your nitric oxide and the oxygen reactive species in your blood vessels. So it's a little bit like having COVID all the time. You don't want to do that. So if you can stay away from erythritol, read your labels and stay away from that. And I think in Romania, they had picked up on the erythritol connection with problems with insulin resistance and obesity. So it's not surprising that when I see people who come in and say, well, you know, I struggle losing weight in my diet, I'm having trouble, I can't give up my soft drinks, but it has 0 calories, doc, what's the problem? Well, the problem isn't always just the calories. It's the ultra highly processed things that go in to these foods that without these additions, people generally don't buy the stuff. So that's all of that to say that if you want to change your diet to something more optimal, where you're needing fewer medications, and your diagnosis starts to not include things like hypertension, obesity, type 2 diabetes, coronary artery disease, shift to a predominantly whole food, plant-based diet with little to no of the ultra highly processed foods that have highly concentrated forms of sweeteners and salts and chemical preservatives. Okay. All right, let's talk about, I already mentioned all that, physical activity. Yeah, let's talk about physical activity. A lot of people consider themselves to be active until I ask them to track how active they are. And they have to like write down or use a wearable device that monitors their heart rate and number of steps, for example, or minutes duration of physical activity. Does anybody know what the targets are, the recommended targets for moderate or vigorous activity? Do you know the difference between moderate or vigorous activity? You would if you were engaged in it. So, yeah, when you can't hold a 4 or 5 word sentence conversation with somebody next to you, it's because you're involved in vigorous exercise. Now, if you can say a sentence without pausing, that's probably more moderate exercise. And that's fine, that's good. Moderate exercise. If you engage in moderate activities, you only need about 2.5 hours of that a week. Or if you could do 30 minutes 5 days out of the week, that makes a significantly positive impact on all your risk factors. If you do that, kids in school generally they get that like it's like automatic part of life. But young people, I assure you, when you get old and slow and lazy and tired and fat like us when we get old, it's a struggle to get those 150 minutes a week. In fact, the kids are usually getting. You can also get by with 75 or half of vigorous activity, and the measurable impact is the same. So let's say you're like me and you're a busy person. I don't know, where am I going to find 2.5 hours out of my whole week to do all this? Okay, well, you could do 1 hour and 15, but you're going to have to hoof it. You're going to have to get out of breath and sweat and make it worth your while, and then the impact is just as measurably positive if you are willing to do that. A lot of people, like myself, this is an area I struggle with, to include strength training. Strength training means resistance training, like weights or resistance bands or these machines at the health clubs and things like that. It's best if you do that probably at least twice a week. Because what I'm seeing happening with the people in their 40s and 50s, certainly in their 60s and 70s, if you focus exclusively on the aerobic or vigorous activity, like I have a family member who can do Ironman. So they're biking a lot and running a lot, swimming training. So relatively high intensity for long periods of time. What will happen is your body will adapt to that and decide that it wants to be a Prius. And so it will burn fat very efficiently. And they start gaining weight. They start gaining fat because they become efficient. By adding strength training, what you're doing with your muscle cells is you're asking your body to be a little bit more like a Mustang or a Maserati that is very fuel inefficient and burns a lot of that stored fuel tank that we carry right around here. And so if you add some of the resistance training, it's like keeping your car with like a 5.0 liter engine instead of the 1.6. It's not quite as efficient, and so you burn more excess stored energy even while you're sleeping if you're building some muscle consistently. But if you choose to only engage in walking, right? Walking is the best exercise, and it is for most people in most circumstances. But if you ignore the building of muscles, your metabolism changes and you become exclusively efficient, and your body will store energy and burn it sparingly. But if you want to waste energy, right, fat, you want to waste that stored fat and burn it away, you need to build some muscle to do that efficiently. And so 2 times a week, they say, is adequate. There's no time associated with the resistance training recommendations because everybody's going to find their max loads differently over different times. And they may choose to do, say, I'll give you an example, bicep curl with 25-pound weights, say 8 reps, 3 sets. But you could also cut that in half and do twice as many. And the work, if you do, remember physics in high school, work equals, force through distance, all this stuff. It's the same amount of work. So you can actually get by with changing your resistance routine in a wide variety of ways, and you still get the same benefit without maybe owning as much equipment or risking injury, which becomes more important once you get 50s, 60s, and 70s. I see a lot of guys come in, they were great weightlifters in their 20s and 30s, and then they tear out their shoulder joint by the time they're 55, or they blow out a disc in their back from deadlifts or squats, things like that. But then we'll see the runners and the other aerobic people who prefer that style over weightlifting or resistance training. They will either blow out a joint like a knee with arthritis, or they'll pull muscles or tendons because they haven't spent so much time really strengthening the muscle groups. They were mainly interested in, can I go the distance without getting short of breath or just pooping out because I run out of fuel. So it's important that you balance the two approaches of fitness. And for those of you who might struggle with prediabetes or diabetes, you can correlate minutes of physical activity to units of insulin. Usually when we see people come to a program that will run over 10 days or 3 weeks, and they have insulin as part of their medication list, by usually day 5 or 6, we can figure out how many units of insulin we have to decrease each day if we give them 30 minutes of walking each day. So usually you can cut about 10, 15 units of insulin off of somebody's medications if I can get them to walk 30 minutes a day, depending on how close they've come to full diabetes versus prediabetes, because that changes how well their pancreas is working. So, and I don't know that. I don't have, you have to just measure it by checking their blood sugar. Okay, physical activity. So that's physical activity. Did it go to sleep? Yeah, it's asleep. Next topic is sleep. Anybody here like me love to sleep? This just captures me. Like, oh, if I could go there. Maybe it has to do with working. You like to go to bed too, huh? Yeah. When you train as a resident and you work for 36-hour shifts in the hospital, this looks very inviting. But there are other people who don't like to go to sleep. You're lucky to get 4, 5, 6 hours of sleep out of these kind of people because they're busy, they're successful, they want to get things done. Life is full, no time to sleep. But there are problems associated with that. Now, on average, some people will just ask me, well, how much should I sleep? Statistically, on average, the average human should get about 8 hours. Some people like me prefer 9. I'm much better with 9, measurably better with 9 hours of sleep compared to 8. Some people are fine with 7. I had one close friend, Richard. He was my neighbor. He would get by with 3.5 hours of sleep a night ever since he was in college. I have a cousin married to a gentleman who's gotten 4 hours of sleep a night since he was in high school. And they do fine. They're rare. So different people require different amounts of sleep. You need to figure out what's optimal for you, and you should probably assume that it's a little higher than you think. All right? And rather than getting fixated on, oh, Dr. Cobos says I had this many hours, think about the quality of sleep and how it makes you feel during the day, the next 24-hour period. And that fancy phrase, circadian rhythm alignment. What that means is being consistent. Being consistent when you go to bed, the conditions under which you go to bed, the time you get up, what you do in the morning as soon as you get up, and what you're doing in the evening just before you go to bed. Call that sleep hygiene, and you can ask me questions about that later. But the importance of regular restorative sleep is difficult to overemphasize. Poor sleep has been linked as an associative, if not causative factor, to excess weight and obesity, hypertension, diabetes, and cognitive and mental wellness declines. I remember I had a friend when I was a resident. He was in his early 30s, and he was a night shift worker at the university hospital where I worked. And so every 4th night I was on call, and he was the night respiratory therapist for the ORs when we would have cases. And by the end of my residency, which I was only there in Omaha 3 years, Mark had developed diabetes. And back in the 90s and 2000s, that was really, really rare. For a young guy, early 30s, relatively fit and buff, had a little bit of a belly, which he developed because he was sleep deprived. That's how it started. We didn't know he was pre-diabetic because we didn't measure it back then. We just waited until you hit diabetes, and then we treated you for diabetes. There was no diagnosis for pre-diabetes. It didn't exist. There was no payment. There was no coding for it. You couldn't get any money if patients came to you with prediabetes. So physicians we did nothing. It's horrible. We did nothing until they were so sick that they needed medications. And that was what was happening to Mark, and we didn't even see it. So restorative sleep. I won't spend too much time on that. Let's go. Stress management. This is one people's not real popular. People wish they could do it, but they don't talk much about it. Stress management. How do you manage stress? To me, I would define stress as burning emotional energy on things which you cannot control. That's one way of defining stress in your life. Yeah, you can think of other things that are stressful that you do have control over. But to me, the real stress that really bothers, becomes pathologic and harms people, are those things which truly are out of their control, and they're burning a lot of time and emotional energy on those things. What that will do over days, weeks, months, and years is it will chronically overstimulate your stress hormones and stress nervous responses. And that's associated with feelings and chemicals in you that promote disease, promote a decline in your emotional and physical well-being. It causes, it promotes inflammatory changes, which is going to aid the progression of heart disease, diabetes, the vasculitis that will give you stroke or heart attack or claudication, peripheral vascular disease, renal failure, all these things that are linked to inflamed tissue get worse with stress. Of course, you can imagine your blood pressure is going to be higher or lower if you're stressed. It's going to be higher. That creates more work for your heart, more demand on the heart, more oxygen supply, more inflammation. Does it make you feel relaxed or anxious? Makes you feel anxious. So that tumbles into a number of categories of mental health that are going to become unbalanced and difficult to then manage over time. And because of the chemical side of it, it impacts your metabolic health. Like your blood sugars tend to run higher. Your insulin doesn't work so well. You're always in this fight or flight mode. I have a friend who's famous for saying, you know, Franklin, when it comes to fight or flight, I don't flight. She's kind of an aggressive personality. We love her. When it comes to fight or flight, I do not flight. She's aggressive. Anyway, so stress management is a big deal. At the top of my list for stress management is prayer and journaling. But a lot of my colleagues would mention things like mindfulness, meditation, yoga. And I do not dictate people's religion. You're welcome to practice whichever one you want. For me, prayer and journaling are at the top. But others, I have friends who are atheists. They can, even an atheist can benefit from these styles and types of stress reduction. You don't have to be Christian or spiritual to benefit from the physical science that our bodies are based upon. So, I want to make sure I got some time for questions. That's fine, right there. Avoiding risky substances. What are risky substances? Well, these are typically the things that cause addictive behaviors. Things that will temporarily make you feel better than you used to, but in the long run, destroy who you are and what you want to do in life. There's been things like alcohol, tobacco. These are the legal addictive substances like tobacco and alcohol. Then there's also the illegal substances. In America, I practice some of the time in West Virginia. West Virginia and Alabama, even in Tennessee, are kind of the U.S., the southeast of U.S. is well known for substance abuse. Methamphetamines, heroin, prescription medication, black market, opioids, prescription painkillers. Those things are pretty common there. In West Virginia, when I arrived, the nurses at the nurses station when I came out, I was starting to see some patients. Somehow in the conversation, it came up that they were telling me, if because I'm not from around there. I'm from Tennessee, different place, still Appalachia, still deep south, but Doc, you're not from around here. Let us explain what it's going to be like around here for you. There are no families in West Virginia who don't have some form of prostitution or drug use in them. Because in order to afford the drugs, someone has to go into prostitution. If somebody goes into prostitution, they're going to get sucked into drugs. So they go hand in hand. And so there's a huge problem. In fact, to retain my license to practice medicine in West Virginia, there are courses I have to take on substance abuse and how to help people deal with that in their own life. So these risky substances, we generally in medicine have talked to people in the context of smoking causes lung cancer, or smoking exacerbates coronary artery disease. All true. My personal opinion is that the social impact of using these type of things, the impact it has on the family, spouse, children, neighborhood, economic status, crime status of that neighborhood or community, those are probably larger, as important problems than simply talking about, well, the rates of lung cancer could go down in our community if we, tax tobacco into non-existence or something like these other kind of solutions that politicians float. But tobacco, excess alcohol, illicit drugs, while they certainly would significantly increase your chance of cancers, mostly GI cancers with alcohol or liver disorders, then there's either the lung cancer or coronary and stroke risk associated with the smoking and tobacco. I'm sorry, I don't have the latest data on what at least in America, we talk about vaping. We're saying, well, I don't smoke, I vape. So I'm not that bad. People will try to convince themselves that, at least I'm moving in the right direction. It's not really that much of an improvement, to be honest. But this is what we talk about in lifestyle medicine about avoiding risky substances. We should probably talk about avoiding risky behaviors. I have a physician friend who is a gambler. She cannot not go to Vegas and blow large portions of her bank account with the gang in Vegas. That is not a strictly, she's not going to pick up lung cancer just by gambling unless she's sitting in a bunch of chain smokers every year. But it does impact her mental and her financial well-being. And generally, physicians stay away from the financial well-being of people. We just talk about their mental health or their physical health. But avoiding risky substances. I mentioned the impact it would have on relationships and mental health. So let's go to social connectedness. So we make sure we have some time for people to ask some questions. And I think this was the only section I actually threw up a graph. I'm going to show you a graph. You won't go to sleep if I show you a graph, will you? Okay. So social connection. Anybody here heard of the blue zones? Those studied by Dan Buettner and the cover story on National Geographic like 10 years ago or something like that. So Dan Buettner had a fantastic presentation at one of our College of Lifestyle Medicine annual meetings. I think this was, it wasn't this past fall. I think it was the year before. Dan Buettner talked. And he had sold the Blue Zones thing to another corporation, but was still very interested in interviewing and going to different places in the world, talking with people about their longevity. And he said, having looked at this now 15 years, he says, let me tell you something I haven't published yet. Of course, now he probably has, because this was maybe 2 years ago. He said, I think after going to places like Okinawa, Loma Linda, which is where I graduated from medical school, Sardinia, there was another place in Central America, where you have these statistically unlikely pockets of people who are living 100 plus years. And he's always emphasized some of the 6 pillars as explaining why it is. But he said, I think social connections, he says, to be honest, I think that's the secret sauce. You'll find a lot of people who, maybe they're vegetarian, or maybe they're, outdoor enthusiasts, or the monks, Buddhist monks who just all day. There's no stress. And he says this social connect, he says, really impacts all of the other pillars in ways that I didn't see when I first published those findings years back. So let me quickly run through maybe a minute or two on each element within the benefits of social connectivity that really add up in multiple ways that we didn't understand initially when we were first studying these centenarians in the blue zones. I want to say this because I put in my notes, I don't want to forget. Social isolation has been studied now for a while. And what they correlated social isolation to, since I just came off the risky behavior, do you know how many cigarettes a day social isolation is the equivalent to being as far as a health risk? It's almost a pack a day. If you choose to live your life without adequate social connection, you fall into the same categories of risk as people who smoke 15 cigarettes a day. In America, a pack has 20 cigarettes. I don't know what they are around here. And if you have shrinkflation, pretty soon there's going to be like 6 cigarettes in a pack. But smoking 15 cigarettes a day is what it's like on your health if you live in social isolation. All-cause mortality, and there's across the board, all the reasons you could possibly wish to die from, 25 to 30% increase in all-cause mortality for those who are socially isolated. And you're much greater risk of dying from a heart attack or stroke if you live in social isolation. And that's why American College of Lifestyle Medicine treats this as a pillar rather than in the early days, it was kind of like a soft add-on. Oh, and you might want to think about, and you might want to, and they would talk about how married couples live longer than single people and such. But now it's been investigated a lot more. And strong social ties are related to, remember I talked about the stress hormones? Did I mention cortisol? These type of things that go up when you don't get enough sleep or when your stress management is bad. They go down when people have good social connections. Oxytocin goes up when you have good social connections and you're experiencing them with other people. Your sympathetic activation and the heart rate and the blood pressure all go down when you're mingling and mixing with people who are friendly and positive towards you and you towards them. We call it kind of like the tribal effect. We've measured better wound healing. If you come to me for surgery, or come for me to get anesthesia so someone else can do surgery on you, I don't recommend you let me do surgery on you. But I would recommend you let me anesthetize you. So when you wake up from surgery and you have these wounds, they will heal better. The better off your marriage or your family, your network, your community, your church, faith community, those connections impact the rate at which your wounds heal after surgery. Impacts your blood sugar levels. Impacts your weight control and your inflammatory markers. All of that. All of those things that I mentioned were involved in all the other areas come together here in social connectivity. Another thing that happens with people who are well connected socially, the behavioral changes which they agree to or consent to engage in, like I'm going to change my diet, or I'm going to exercise more, or I'm going to pick whatever, I'm going to quit smoking. The better the support system they have, the better their compliance and adherence to these changes that they commit to making, the better it goes better. That's why I see people who come to a group setting and we do a program like we did 2 years ago here. That group setting, that's special sauce in there. I can do as much health education, on remote internet connection. You can share people my videos or whatever. But if they're alone at home, the impact is measurably different than if they're with some new friends who say, you know what, I hate exercising too. I would much rather just sit around and play cards. You want to play cards? No, come on, let's go for a walk. Oh, we'll suffer together. Group suffering. It just goes much better for them. Cardiac rehab studies show that completion rates are much, much higher if the spouse or some peer is with them going through that rehab program. It just works better. It works better, and they stick with it. We think that's because you've heard this term accountability partner. It matters. It helps you adhere, and it creates an environment where if you go into a restaurant with friends who have shared a commitment to eating more healthy, that there's a little bit of peer pressure in that little group. You just went into that environment, so you have a more positive environment in which to stay committed to that more difficult decision you might have just made recently. Whereas if you went in alone, you'd hit Pizza Hut or French fries at McDonald's and a shake. And so there's increased compliance, and particularly when we have group and we do group exercise, everybody kind of sticks to it. It's the Marine Corps in America is a great example of that. Everybody goes and they suffer together. No one wants to be seen as the wimp. And so all these recruits go into boot camp, they do not want to be the last guy in the run. And so there's this invisible social net that captures people and pulls them towards success that does not occur when you're alone. It's not typically, unless maybe you're Navy SEALs or something like that. We're good? Still a little scratchy, sorry. Let's move to question and answer. That way other people... Do we have a roaming mic? We're going to take a little time for some question and answer. And while people are thinking about what their question is, I'll finish with another comment. Because I'm in perioperative medicine, people who report loneliness and depression, they require a lot more opioid painkillers. And so their risk for addiction goes up, and their side effects go up because they're getting hammered with more medication. People who are lonely and isolated process and perceive reality differently than the rest of the world. And so to impact those perceptions, it takes more medication for depression or pain, anxiety, stuff like that. Anyway, so social connections modulate our biology, our stress biology, improves adherence, it reduces complications and mortality after surgery, and that makes it something that we can control. It's a modifiable clinical risk factor that you can improve just by behavior and not with a prescription. All right, so went through a lot of things there. I'd be happy to answer some questions if some have come up in your mind. Maybe as a closing comment, I will say that it is easy to, I have found it easy to inspire people to aspire to better, more optimal health habits. But the spirit is willing and the flesh is weak. And so my take on it, because I mentioned, I have atheist friends, I have Muslim friends, Buddhist friends. As a Christian, the biblical model is that I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, and it is He who worketh in you both to will and to do His good pleasure. So I think I have an advantage, not because I'm a superhuman, but because I depend upon a higher power to achieve the goals that are, for me, unrealistic. If you've had friends who've been at Narcotics Anonymous or Alcoholics Anonymous, these are secular organizations whose first commandment is basically, I am helpless and need a power outside of myself to overcome my addiction. And when they go through the AA chants at the beginning of those meetings, which I attended when I was a med school student, they recognize this issue, that humanity is inspired and aspires to great things, but is inclined to do horrible things to each other and to themselves. And that is a fundamental aspect of the human condition, that we want to be better. And we know how to be better. But to find how to do it, I think that's Paul, Romans chapter 7. But to do it, I'm at a loss. Yes, and so there's a dependence that you may find you need. Any questions about any of the science or things that we talked about? Yes?
I want to know, how does one know that the
How does one know whether they're pre-diabetic? You can test, in America, the pharmacies, you don't even have prescriptions anymore. You can go to Walmart and get the little finger stick things and check. You have to calibrate it first, and then you check. In America, the cutoff is about 100. Blood glucose of 100. Of course, I think our units are measured differently than yours here. I'm sorry. I can't give you the conversion right off the top of my head. But so there, in America, there's a limit. If you have fasted and not eaten any food or calories or drunk anything besides water for 8 hours, and somebody is over 100, they're 101, that we think of as pre-diabetic. That is, they're coming to the point where their pancreas is unable to produce sufficient levels of insulin, and their body is unable to receive those signals. And so you have insulin resistance. Not only insulin production might be a problem, but insulin, its effect at the receptors in the cells are inhibited sufficiently that you still have higher than generally acceptable levels of sugar still floating around in your blood, and you measure it, and you see that. Once you get, I think it's 116, that's diabetes. You're not just pre-diabetic, you're diabetic. That's how we would define pre-diabetes in the States.
So it's something that they would pick if you went to do your bloods.
So if you go for blood work and they draw serum values and you're fasted 8 hours, it can be picked up.
They'll pick, okay.
And if they, whoever they are, if they don't pick it up, you will. You're like, oh man, I didn't eat, and it's like I'm 103. Oh. It's because there may be physicians that you go to, they don't care. Until you get 116, they don't care. You should care. Because that's when you're going to find your success to reverse.
So you just change your diet then.
You will need to change your diet, physical activity, and sleep. Those would be the three ones. Oh, let me add this too. So generally when I work with people, I start with sleep. Because I find quickest and easiest success by changing people's sleep first. People are generally willing because they're tired. They're tired. Listen, would you do this? Do me a favor. Sleep in tomorrow. Sleep in tomorrow. Most people are willing to do that. But if I go, I want you to cut out all the M&Ms, your favorite soft drink, don't eat red meat anymore, or any processed meat, they're like, oh, doc, I can't give that up. So that's harder. But if you can help their energy level, get their energy level up a little bit, you recharge the batteries a little bit, then their mood will improve just a little bit there. Functioning at work, the relationships start to improve just a little bit there. There's some positive reinforcement like, oh, yeah, I think I'm doing just a little bit better. Then you start getting a little bit of psychological momentum, and you can start working on other changes. Then you can add some physical activity, because then you can keep up the tiredness, and then they sleep better. The better your exercise, the better your sleep patterns. The better your sleep patterns, the better your exercise. Then you can start adding some dietary changes. And so the diet, the sleep, and the exercise, I tend to try to focus on those three pillars first, and then you really can start to get a little momentum going. Good question. Was there another? Did you have your hand up? Or okay. This young lady has one.
Can I not use it? All right.
I'll repeat it for the recording. What's your question? Other people are wanting, you can't be here. We promised that they could watch it remotely later.
So you mentioned type 2 diabetes.
Yes, ma'am.
Anything about how lifestyle medicine relates to type 1 diabetes?
Oh, that's a deep, interesting question. So the question is, I've talked and I mentioned specifically by name type 2 diabetes, but I didn't talk about type 1. So for those of you who don't know, type 1 differs from type 2 in the strictest classical way of that type 1 is generally going to be triggered by an autoimmune disorder that chews up most, if not all, probably most, of your beta cells in the pancreas, which are responsible for producing insulin. It usually happens younger in life. I did see it a little bit after COVID. Some adults would come down with type 1 diabetes after their pancreas was destroyed through a vasculitis triggered by COVID, and suddenly they were type 1 diabetic. And you really are dependent upon a pharmaceutical injection of insulin, Humulin, to manage that problem because you now no longer have sufficient endogenous or internal self-produced insulin coming out of the pancreas. We have some case reports where if you catch that early, within 6 months, and aggressively go with a whole food plant-based diet that is therapeutic, you have a lot of elimination in this kind of a diet. Kids on the age of 7 to 12, you can prevent it from going into full type 1. It'll be like a 1.5 or type 2. And they can manage things with diet without insulin if you catch it very early and you're very aggressive. That virtually never happens. And so you generally never hear about it. But it is technically feasible, and I know people who have done it. Now, I've had some adults come to me with type 1 diabetes. And the best I've been able to do with them is generally cut their insulin by half is reasonable. These are people who come to me and they're taking 30 in the morning, or 50-ish in the morning, 30-ish, 20-ish in the evening, maybe a little bit of regular, depending on how they have their breakfast, lunch, or dinner, if they even have dinner, because usually I'll switch them to a 2-meal-a-day plan. Just makes blood sugar management easier. And then go up on the exercise, because exercise has an equivalency to insulin. Usually you can chop down their insulin doses by about 50%, generally. I've seen more, and I've seen some non-compliance make the results less impressive. There's always an impact. And I encourage people to do that, even though they can't reverse diabetes necessarily if it's a type 1 and they're up 10, 15 years into it. I think it's valuable because as you decrease the insulin, you decrease the risk factors that you're getting from exogenous insulin and the side effects. There's a lot of hunger. And by the way, insulin makes you hungry. It's horrible. I mean, people who don't have diabetes usually experience it when they are post-exercise. No, not post-exercise, pre-exercise, and they have a high-carb meal. That insulin surge will make them really, really hungry. So that's common. But so did that help answer your question? Is there something I could say different or word different? Or is there an aspect to it that you wanted to know different about?
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to know a lot more, but maybe there'll be
Okay, another person, then we can come back to you if you want. Any other questions? Maybe in 3 or 4 more minutes. Go ahead.
Vaping has become very popular.
Yes, vaping. Yes.
Just wondered, what effect is it having on the lungs? As Ireland was great, smoking, smoking ban. Now young people especially.
They reviewed a bit of that at our last conference last fall, and I didn't pay much attention to it. And so I apologize, I can't give you some specifics. I remember the generalities that they said was that they're worried that vaping is going to have worse results than smoking itself because of the additives that they put in there to make it taste and smell better. The nice thing about smoking was that it was kind of repulsive in some ways. And it became socially acceptable to exclude people, like no smoking allowed. It used to be when you flew on an aircraft, it was like this vapor-filled smoke tube. Everybody in the 70s was getting on an aircraft to smoke cigarettes. It didn't matter whether you were a smoker or not. You just came off the aircraft just covered with it. In the 50s and 60s, American physicians recommended smoking to stop cough. So there's this whole shift in culture towards smoking. Part of it was just the smell and the staining and such. When we became more vain in the 80s and 90s, and we don't want to be seen this way or smell this way, and so vaping really fits in great because you can make it smell however you want. It's kind of cool because you're more health conscious, but the impact is probably going to be as bad or worse than smoking. I'm sorry I don't have better details on it. Yes, ma'am, you had your hand up.
Just going to add that I read an article a while back saying that it actually causes a disease called
I haven't seen it on X-ray yet, but it sounds awful interesting. There's always some unique problems that come up when something is accepted widely in society that shouldn't be. It just takes us time to figure it out, It was that way with smoking. And I think they said 4 out of 5 doctors recommend Camels. That was the the magazine ad that we had back in the States. So, yes, one in the back.
Talk more about this exercise balancing cardiovascular resistance. Like if you walk and run, and then how do you balance, like you said,
If you walk and run, how do you miles plus the rest? Okay. So what I'd recommend my sister, because my sister's complaining that she's putting on weight, but she can do an Ironman. But she doesn't do any weight training. She's just do all this aerobic stuff. And so there's distinct type of muscle fibers. I think they still call them type 1 and type 2 muscle fibers. Fast twitch and slow twitch. They tend to burn different fuels preferentially, and their size different. So like muscle hypertrophy, when somebody has a large bicep because their quadriceps in their legs, it's because they are overloading them to failure. Runners and walkers typically don't do that. Before they fail, they stop running. And so they don't develop the same type of muscles that somebody in the gym would when they're doing squats with a couple 100 pounds on the shoulders. You can't do that with running. So you don't develop the same muscle fibers. The metabolism isn't the same. And so the storage and use of a certain fuel source is different. Someone will store fat and burn carbs with fat preferentially in an aerobic condition, as opposed to somebody who's going to do an anaerobic to failure set with squats or curls. And then what that does is it sets you up to burn a higher rate of fuel throughout the day. And so you're burning higher amount of calories at rest and at night after you do that type of muscle training. And that overall, that's good because it's going to lower your blood sugar. It's going to prevent you from putting on excess pounds and weights over pounds of fat over the months and years ahead. At least that's how they say that works. Does that make sense? Helpful? Yes, that's why it's recommended you try to do the 75 of vigorous or 150 minutes of modest, and then 2 days, at least 2 days, because I know people who do 6, but they tend to be the people who can't run long distances, but they're like, I got to turn sideways to go through the doors, because it just that's their appeal. And it's interesting. You see fitness people. We all have our interests. Like some people will love to work out, but they eat horrible, and they'll do risky things, and they're obnoxious to be around. They have bad social connectivity. But then there are other people who have these wonderful socialite experiences with no stress in their life whatsoever. They would never do exercise. So we all have our personalities that draw us to maybe one or two of the pillars that, oh, well, I like that. So you don't have to even encourage me to do it. I don't need to pray to the Lord for help in these areas. It's just part of who He makes me. But there's always something in each of our lives that is onerous and it's hateful. You just can't imagine living life in that way because it just doesn't fit you. You don't like it. Each of us has that. Okay, one more question. I'll give you the last one and we'll finish up because it's a little past 7.
Well, at the beginning you mentioned the importance of behavior change, and then you also, I suppose, spoke a little bit about will and
Yes.
the importance of prayer. I suppose I'm really curious.
Yeah.
Behavior change is very challenging.
It is.
And I'm wondering what are the things you can say that contribute towards positive behavior change, because willpower is quite often not enough.
It is insufficient. You are right. Insufficient in some areas. In some areas. Like my sister, you don't have to talk her into going for a run. Her willpower is perfectly capable of doing that. You don't have to talk me into going to bed early at night. I would love to finish my day early every single day and sleep in late. I like it. I like eating healthy. I grow my own food in my garden back home. But other people, they're like, don't be taking my Dr. Pepper away. It's Dr. No Dr. Cobos, yes Dr. Pepper. So the lowest bar is the social connectedness thing. That's why I was kind of including it. You don't have to have any degree of spirituality or connection to a higher power. If you can just connect with friends who you like and enjoy their company, who are willing to encourage you in whatever new pathway you want to go into, and even better, join you in it. That's a huge thing. Beyond that, the next thing I tend to start to talk to people about is the degree and what we would write in a prescription, the intensity and frequency of a change. There are two approaches, or there's a spectrum of approaches. I used to be on the spectrum that was radical. We would do what we call an immersion program. Someone would come and live with me in my house, and they lose all connection to the old life. It's like going to Spain to learn Spanish. You are immersed, and you learn it quicker and better, and it sticks a lot harder. So you can take somebody out and make dramatic, radical changes in the way they eat, sleep, interact with other people, the way they exercise, all these pillars. You do that in 10, 20 days, 30 days, and then send them home. And it makes a big, noticeable change in a short period of time. There's the other side of the spectrum. You can do what what was his name? Cleary? The guy wrote a book called Atomic Habits. It was a very well-known book a couple of years back. Atomic Habits. He's on the other side of the spectrum, where you will take very small changes and make very small atomic level changes a little bit at a time, with the idea that your psyche doesn't notice that quite so much and resist it because it's almost too small to kind of show up on the radar. So those changes can stick, and once they are in place a longer period of time, they become a habit, and they can go on the back burner, and you don't really feel like it's changed anymore. It's already changed. So those are kind of two approaches, different personalities, different people, and different pillars in the same person. Might respond favorably to one approach versus another. You just kind of have to try it out and see who you are in that regard. People also talk in terms of carrot versus stick. What I mean by that is, like when I was a resident and I would do anesthesia for open heart surgery. These are people who were told by their surgeon, we need to take you in and split your chest open today, because if we don't do that, you will die tomorrow. It's like, we've done these tests, we've checked the pictures, and your arteries are so clogged, we don't know how you're alive. So it's up to you. If you want to die, go home. If you want to live, let us do surgery today or tomorrow. So then they come to me and I anesthetize them, get them through that. And then they wake up and the surgeon says, now, this is what your images were yesterday, right? There's no blood flow there, no blood flow there. Now today, we did your surgery and now you've got blood flow. Yeah, I know, my chest pain's gone. Of course, it usually took 3 days to wake up in the ICU. But they had these conversations after this massive operation, life-threatening illness, very risky surgery. And they wake up and the doctor says, now listen, I don't want to see you eating pizza again. You got to stop the Coca-Cola, and you can't smoke ever again. And I know, Doc, I know, you're so right. And that's exactly what it is. In fact, there was a surgeon I worked with, Jeff Sugimoto, an excellent surgeon. You know what he did between surgeries? He went out for a smoke. He's doing open heart surgery 3 times a day, and he's smoking in between. So there was an article that came out, it was called Change or Die. That's the option we gave a lot of people in the 90s and the O's and the teens for open heart surgery. Before they started doing stents and rotavirutors and lasers and all these kind of minimally invasive techniques. And say, this is your options. You can change how you live, or you can die. What is the statistical success rate for that scenario, do you think, that they found in this study? 1 out of 10 people changed. Now, they didn't say whether or not the other 9 died. Because they had surgery, I guess. Maybe they live a little longer. The stick doesn't work. She got it. That's exactly what we have learned. And that's why the social connectivity stands so high head and shoulders above, because friends, I mean, good friends, some people say, with friends like you, who needs an enemy? But good friends are a positive thing in life. And I think I had 2 uncles who smoked like chimneys, but they loved my mother, who was their baby sister. And it's because their baby sister begged them to give up smoking. Eventually they did, because of the connection, the love, the family connection with my mom. So the stick can work for a few people, but generally lifestyle change needs to occur in a setting that's more nurturing and positive, and less like United States Marine Special Forces training, which does work for a very small elite portion of the population, and they do incredible, amazing things. Most of us are not like that.
I find personally, I've told a few friends right here that my willpower is as weak as the next person.
Yeah.
I don't have any special strong willpower.
Yeah, I'm not a superhuman.
And I can be very strict about my diet. I've changed the way I see food. It's either inflammation or non-inflammatory. That's the way I see food now. But come Christmas time and my family are all around, there's a lot of chocolate in the house.
Yeah.
I can ignore the chocolate, but don't put a bowl of Lindor balls in front of me.
Those are incredibly good. I know exactly what you're
The
talking
red
about.
ones, if I see those,
They're red ones.
ignore them. I'm trying to ignore them.
And they call you, don't they?
They're just
Oh,
glaring at you.
Merry
I'll just have one.
Christmas.
Christmas, I'll just have one. Next thing you know, I've had
Merry
2,
Christmas.
I've had 3. So I get to the point where I say, right, that's it, I'm done. And the only thing that will get me off that is if I go back watching health videos. So I call it Y power. Not willpower, but I don't have any.
Yeah.
So I feed myself with the Y power.
Why? Why am I doing this?
Why am I not going to eat that?
You
stuff? So
you
that
trigger
really helps me.
you trigger a memory that I had. There was a really attractive trainer who was an author of a recipe book, I think, that I had. And she had said she loved, and the reason why I remember it, not because she was beautiful, but because we both had the same weakness, which was vanilla ice cream. I love vanilla ice cream since I was a kid, especially French vanilla ice cream.
No, obviously.
I guess not. But she said that when she would see her favorite ice cream, what she would tell herself in her head was, that does not taste as good as this looks. And so she chose to value her self-image, which was a longer-term thing, compared to the shorter-term, incredibly intense pleasure of that bowl of her favorite ice cream, which I share that sensation with her. So yeah, you can kind of reframe things. You reframe it in a way that the things that you do absolutely, honestly, truly love and are drawn to because of the pleasure, you need to find something more pleasurable. There's a phrase in some of our literature that we use here at the church that says, teach the people and show them something better. They're never going to look at me and say, Cobos, this Dr. Pepper tastes fantastic. I love it. I can never change that. Just like I can't change the French vanilla thing I have, never change that. But I can find something better and focus on that, because I cannot erase the pleasure that I get from French vanilla ice cream. It's just never going to go away. I love that. Tastes good. Always will. Real quick, and then this will probably be the last. This should be the last one. Yeah.
Social connections.
Yeah.
I agree a lot with that.
Yeah.
Personally, I know myself.
Mhm.
There are some people in my life I know that too much of this person stresses me out.
Ah,
After a conversation with them, I feel drained. I sort of avoid them.
yeah.
Or have them in small doses intentionally.
Yeah.
And if I work out that this person helps me grow, I work with that person.
Yeah.
So social connections, I really find it good for me personally.
I didn't mention that there are negative sides to some of our social connections. Right? Not everybody is all good. Not everybody is all bad. And so you will notice there are times when you connect with people that there is some negativity exchanged. And if that becomes a pattern, if that's the predominant way that they interact with you every single time, I do not think it is un-Christ-like to take that fact into consideration as you manage the people with which you choose to willingly interact with. You don't have to ostracize, hate them, talk bad about them, injure them, but it does not demand, life does not demand that you allow others to negatively impact your life. So, shall we? Yes.
I was just going to say the book that you mentioned,
Atomic Change, I think. Atomic Habits, excuse me.
I think the author is James.
James Clear, not Cleary. Right. Yes, James Clear. Thank you. You're right. I saw a couple of interviews with him. I have not read the book entirely. I've had a couple of chapter summaries, but I haven't read it. I liked it. I liked it a lot. So, Atomic Habits by James Cleary. Clear? Sorry. Clearly, I'm not paying attention. All right. I think that's it. Thank you very much for coming out and your